everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am here, and I'm so looking forward to talking about the upcoming CPC Film Series. It's going to be on Friday, November 5th at the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. This time around, we are going to be watching It's interesting how each film that we do is sort of much different than the previous film. This is going to be one that we're gonna have fun with it. We're gonna enjoy it. It's gonna be funny, and it's gonna be something that we can kick off our weekend with a really funny film. As Professor Tom Davis is going to be presenting Mel Brooks' Robin Hood Men in Tights, a 1994 film that, for reasons of which we're going to find out, Professor Davis is really enjoys it, and so much so to choose this. So, Professor Davis, welcome back to the show.
Thanks again for having me.
Of course. And so is it the last time that you were on when you did your last film series?
I believe that's correct. Back in 2016, I believe.
I mean, I lose track. I actually, for a previous article that we were doing, I went down and tracked back all of the different ones that we've had, and I want to say this is our either 11th or 12th film series. But yeah, as I think back and we realize that, I want to say this is the 11th or 12th film series that we have done, and it's really awesome that now everybody kind of who really had an interest in it has stepped up to the plate, and now some of us are getting a second crack at it. I'm also being joined here today by one of our new Nightly News members, Dylan Bowman. Dylan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Dylan, one of the reasons that we want to have you on is because when you came to the first film series, when we watched Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the first film series that you attended, it was something that after the show you were like, this is so cool, I really like this. And at one of our club members, our co-president Leslie Heimball, is finishing up her internship and is going to be gone. So we need a new film series correspondent, because really Leslie's been doing it the entire time. So you have some big shoes to fill, but I know that you really enjoy film, so we're looking forward to having you on that. What was your, and we'll ask Professor Davis the same question. What is your connection with film? What are some of your favorite movies, and how did you get into liking movies?
Oh boy, well that's a big question. So the way that I'm tied into film a little bit is I got into it. I used to write my own stories, and I basically got into it from doing short films with my Boy Scout troop when I was a part of Boy Scouts. And then I started doing it with friends, family, and it just became like a thing. I've made several short films and have them on a YouTube channel, Fellowship Studios. It's really something I've come to enjoy over the years. I've tried to expand my expertise in it and learn more from other people. Some of my favorite movies, one recently that I've seen that I really liked was 1917. Just the cinematography in that was absolutely amazing. I also love Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, some of the classics, of course.
I'm a huge Star Wars fan. For many years, I've spent many a Christmas down at the IMAX theater down in York. So we'll drive down to York to see Star Wars on IMAX and a lot of the bigger summer blockbusters. If you're going to see a movie like that, in my opinion, drive to York and see it on the IMAX. It's well worth the extra time investment. And I really kind of think, and I've talked about this on my film podcast nights at the movies, that I kind of think that that's where film is at least in the cinema, is going. And we talk about how it's frustrating because a lot of independent films may not have their time in the sun in terms of being on the big screen, and a lot of that stuff might go straight to streaming. But so what we want to talk about today with you, Professor Davis, is a little bit more about Robin Hood Men in Tights. Why this film, of all the films in film history that you could choose, why this one was the one for you. And I want to start off with, I know that you're a huge Mel Brooks fan. So how did you, Mel Brooks, it's funny because I know that you're even a little bit younger than me. His last directorial effort came in 1995 with Dracula Dead and Loving It. I would imagine you would have been just a middle or high schooler at that time. So how did you get so enthralled with Mel Brooks? Was it at that time or was it later in life? How did it all come to be?
Yeah, he kind of left the film side of things in the mid '90s and had a pretty successful career continuing on to Broadway with a Broadway adaptation of the Producers. Well, I'm a comedy buff. I could have picked any number of Mel Brooks movies for this, kind of as you mentioned. And in fact, I had chosen a different movie originally. I was originally going to show the 1977 film High Anxiety, which was a spoof of several Hitchcock films. And if you know Mel Brooks, he's done a lot of different spoof movies. The issue that I had with showing that film again was when I went back to watch it for the first time in quite a while, as is the case with many things these days, I realized that there wasn't necessarily a great deal of representation in that film. And so, I took kind of a step back and I thought, well, there are lots of other Mel Brooks movies that I could talk about. I wasn't going to do
Blazing Saddles,
Blazing
Young
Saddles,
History of the World.
Yes, Blazing Saddles, because even though it was a satire of race relations, nonetheless, some of the tropes used in the film and whatnot, they just won't fly today for obvious reasons. And so I decided to take the Robin Hood Men in Tights movie because it seems to be the first movie amongst all of his movies, where he took care to ensure that there was more representation by essentially introducing Dave Chappelle. It's Dave Chappelle's first role in a film, and there's a lot of play on the word hood. The film opens with a troupe of African Americans rapping about the current state in Rottingham. It's very dated, but it'd be right at home with some of the family-friendly Will Smith hip-hop of the early 90s. And so I think he was sending a message immediately that this film is going to be much different from of my previous ones, because even though we're looking back far in history to talk about, the epic, the myth of Robin Hood, he still focused on, in a way, it was anachronistic. He's always had this way of using anachronism as a comedic device, and this kind of takes that and turns it on its head, if you will.
Now, you'd mentioned that a lot of what Brooks had done was from the parody satire genre, if you will, a subgenre of comedy. Do you have have you done any research into Mel Brooks himself in getting ready for this presentation, why he approached his films that way?
Yeah, a lot of it is just his comedic background. Really was, going all the way back to some of his earlier films. He might not have necessarily been spoofing something from popular culture at the time. If you take a film like History of the World Part 1, where he's literally spoofing the history of the world. The amazing thing about Mel Brooks that not many people know is that I believe there's a term for this, but he's won one of all of the major awards in entertainment. He's a Grammy winner, he's an Emmy winner, he's an Oscar winner, and he's a Tony winner. There aren't many people who are in that sort of category. But, I'm not really sure why satire is his main approach in things. After Robin Hood, he did Dracula Dead and Loving It, which again was a spoof, was satire of that. However, there were some films in his lexicon, some of his lesser known films, that weren't exactly spoofs. Another one that I toyed with possibly selecting was a film called Life Stinks, which is one that's not very often talked about because it's not in the normal.
Right, it's a little bit outside of what he's used to doing.
Yeah. It's still a comedy movie, but it also has a very realistic element to it in terms of what it's like to live on the streets, trying to stay alive, trying to eat, trying to do all of those things. And this was from the position of a billionaire. He got involved in a situation where he placed a bet with another millionaire person that said that there's no way he could survive 30 days on the streets. That one had a little bit of, had a lot more dramatic elements to it. That, his most famous movies like, Young Frankenstein and Spaceballs and things like that, which is obviously another spoof movie, didn't necessarily have.
Yeah, I would interject there. I've seen Spaceballs. It's definitely, it's a funny one. It's a, what would they call it? A cult classic, I guess. And I haven't seen Robin Hood Men in Tights. I've seen the trailer. One question about it I would have is, What's the cinematography like? Spoilers aside, of course.
It's actually pretty close to. I mean, they tried to capture a lot of the same sort of essence as the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves movie.
Okay, I've seen that one. That one's good.
So it's kind of in that vein, except at times it is a lot more, a little more over the top. So at times it's very realistic, but at other times it's rather surreal.
What's interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up, Dylan, was the notion of a cult classic. I think it's really interesting as I look at a cult classic up on the wall, my poster of Big Lebowski. It seems that some of these type of movies from the 90s have really hung on for like 20 years. When I was getting ready for today's show, I didn't realize that there is a very, very strong cult following to this film. Now, not meaning any disrespect whatsoever, but this kind of follows the same template in that it had a relatively low budget of about $20 million and only did about $35 million gross. Now, obviously, they made some money, but in the long run, there is still a very, very core group of hardcore followers that are really, really interested in this movie. What about it do you think led to this idea of it being a cult classic more than 25 years later?
Honestly, I mean, this might sound simple. I think mainly because it's just so darn funny. I mean, it is a really funny movie, and I think there's also, because of the recognizableness of Robin Hood. So it's not that people needed to necessarily even get invested in a new plot. Folks were already kind of, because Prince of Thieves came out right around the same time.
I think it was about a year before, right?
Yeah. So people were already aware of the Robin Hood story as well as that film version.
And that was a big film. I mean, Kevin Costner, I still remember that the soundtrack with the Bryan Adams song, that song was #1 for that entire summer. I mean, not that carried the movie or anything like that, but the notoriety that kind of reinvigorated the Robin Hood cinematic universe, if you will. I mean, there has been, I believe, 4 different Robin Hood films made over the years, if you count this one. Major motion pictures. I'm sure there's been TV movies or other things based on the story. But what do you think? I mean, I understand and appreciate that it's funny. Tell me to what extent, because it's been so long since I've seen it, tell me to what extent you feel that the comedy here holds up. Because one of the things that a lot of films struggle with is they really get dated to when they were released, which I do believe that's one of the reasons why Lebowski still holds up. Because other than, at the beginning, him writing a check, which most people don't do anymore, it's comedy that transcends time in a way. Do you feel that that's sort of similar here?
Yeah, and I think it also helps that it's set in a much earlier time period as well. I think that contributes to it.
Cool. I like that.
I found it interesting. I might be pronouncing his name wrong here, but Carl Elwes.
Cary Elwes?
Yeah. This, I believe you said, was his first casting in a film, correct?
No, he had been in. He had also been in The Princess Bride. No, it would have been the first for Dave Chappelle. This was Dave Chappelle's first role. Yeah.
So I was going to say, I would just find that interesting because I have seen Princess Bride, and that's another classic.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I believe he was cast in that film, because he was kind of riding high from that.
And it's also, if you think about it, not necessarily the same setting, but it's one of those fantasy, set hundreds of years ago. And I wonder if that was almost an homage to somewhat poking fun at The Princess Bride in itself, too, by casting him for this piece.
It could very well be the case, yeah.
Now, I want to kind of talk a little bit more, and I know that we did bring this up on our podcast 3 years ago, so people may not necessarily remember. What is it about film? I mean, you've always been a supporter. You're at every single one of these. You've obviously presented before when you presented Airplane. Now you're presenting again. This is not something that we're necessarily required to do. It's something we do because we really have a passion for it. What was your entry point into really becoming a film buff, if you will?
Well, again, it would be comedy is what got me into films to begin with. I really gravitated more toward comedy films than anything else. I mean, honestly, for me with film, it's a chance to see, I'm not really that big of a fan of films that are based on books, to be honest with you. More often than not, I would rather be envisioning the events in my own head as I see them, as I read. But with comedy films, it's always good to see how other people interpret things and present them in a film. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that applies to drama and thrillers and all other genres. But for me, comedy just always stood out because even if you don't have the greatest story to tell, if you can get people to forget about things and just laugh and be in the moment, to me, there's no greater emotional connection to a film than laughter. I mean, I get for some people it's dramatic feelings. It's, your heart racing, all of that. There are times for that for me too. I think the most recent film I saw was The Many Saints of Newark on HBO.
I'm very looking forward to seeing that.
It's pretty good. But it was always just the comedy that spoke to me because, I mean, kind of an odd connection here, but that's why I'm a pretty big Family Guy fan, because at a certain point, that show almost entirely abandoned narrative in service to just cramming as many jokes as they could in there, as many absurd. And we know, going back to Airplane, that absurdism is kind of my bag. That's what I always liked about comedy, is that it could have a great story to tell, but it could have a mediocre story to tell, almost as like an oh, by the way, right? As long as I'm laughing, it's a good movie in my eyes.
Absolutely. Dylan, do you have any other questions for Professor Davis?
Oh, yeah, kind of jumping in on that thought, since it's your favorite genre, what is your favorite comedy movie? Because there's a lot of good ones out there.
There are a lot of good ones out there. I'd probably have to rattle off a list of a few of them. I may be uniquely positioned, considering my age and the films that I was into. I'm a big fan of the Woody Allen films. Now, of course, the reception around Woody Allen today is quite different than it was many years ago. But it was those films, and if you get into Woody Allen films, Mel Brooks films aren't really that too far behind. They're often talked about. In fact, there was at the time when they were both bursting onto the scene, they were called like the two most promising comics of the age were those two. And so I would have to say things like Annie Hall, Take the Money and Run, obviously Robin Hood Men in Tights, but I'm also a Spaceballs fan. I love History of the World Part 1. I love Young Frankenstein. Outside of those folks, I think the ultimate Christmas movie is Christmas Vacation.
Of course.
That's one of my favorites there. A little known picture that was released at the same time as a number of other blockbusters and didn't get a lot of attention was a film called UHF by Weird Al Yankovic, way back in
starring Michael Richards.
Yes, back in 1989, I believe. Those are just a few that I can think of at the moment. There
UHF's such a great movie.
UHF
I haven't seen it in a little while. I gotta watch that one again, because that's always a good one to laugh at. Well, Dylan, what are your favorite comedies?
Well, one that comes to mind, I probably could rattle off a list as well. One that comes to mind is the Mall Cop movies.
Okay,
our family loves those. They're really funny. I do have on my list UHF. That's something
great. Something we all have in common.
I also forgot to mention several of the other Zucker films, right? Like Airplane, like The Naked Gun, like Hot Shots Part 1 and Part 2. Those movies are hilarious too, but you don't have to take them all that seriously.
I would say, and it's interesting, Leslie and I actually did a ranking of our favorite comedies, and among my favorite would be things like, of course, The Big Lebowski, Office Space. I'm also a big fan of Beverly Hills Cop and that series. I've always loved Eddie Murphy and loved his comedy. And nice to see that, over the last decade or so, he's really revitalized his career after some horrific duds at the box office.
A few missteps, yeah.
So just before we get out of here, Professor Davis, I want to just ask you really quickly, just for a little cherry on top, if you will, preview a little bit of what you're going to talk about in your presentation prior to the film.
Well, what I'd like to kind of do is I'd kind of like to have this just be a little bit of a celebration of comedy and also of Mel Brooks, simply because like a lot of young folks are not really familiar with what he's done, because he hasn't, like we said, he hasn't done a movie in a long time.
Well, he hasn't directed a movie, and we're going to talk a little bit more before we get out of here. I've got some news that you might be interested in that maybe you're not aware of. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
And then a celebration of his life and career as well. He recently just turned 95 years old.
Wow!
So I mean, that right there is a cause for celebration. I'm trying to remember how old Carl Reiner was when he passed. So I mean, and I just think that his career needs. is worth looking at. Not, I mean, because his comedies were also influential to subsequent filmmakers.
Oh,
as
without
well.
a doubt.
So, I mean, it makes sense to kind of pay homage to where some of the roots of comedy in film really come from. Because, you know, like I said, with him and then later with Woody Allen and folks like that, that's when comedy movies were starting to be, besides like the Laurel and Hardy films and things like that, like comedy films were starting to become much more universal.
Well, I do have just a couple of things. First of all, something that really interested me is while 95, so it's been over 25 years since Mel Brooks has directed a film, he keeps extremely busy. He's got a ton on his IMDb page. Interestingly enough, mostly voice work, including things like Dora the Explorer. As the Mad Hatter in Dora the Explorer. Of course, he was also had a notable run in Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yes.
But also, here's something interesting that I just found out. In 2022, there will be an animated film in which, of course, he's going to be doing a voice in there called Blazing Samurai, and is going to sort of pay tribute to Blazing Saddles in a more modern animated fashion.
I had not heard about that.
So, and Samuel L. Jackson is the lead voice along with Mel Brooks. So that might actually, my kids are much too old to pay any mind to stuff like that. But definitely one that might be worth checking out.
The rumors about a Spaceball sequel are back out there now, too.
Interesting.
Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
That's funny. Professor Davis, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for your willingness to be a continuing part of the CPC Film Series. This is something that really is a sort of a passion project for our team, and we really appreciate the extra effort that you're making to do this, and we're going to make sure that we're going to be out on Friday, November 5th. Doors open at 6 o'clock, and the presentation will be at 6:30. There'll be refreshments supporting the Colleges Against Cancer Club is going to be there selling some refreshments to support what they're doing. And it's shaking up to be a wonderful evening that, now that we're able to invite guests here as well to the campus, we just look forward to everyone coming out and joining us and having another wonderful edition of the CPC Film Series.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's always my pleasure. And Dylan, you're definitely a very conscientious person, and you seemed a little concerned coming over here. This wasn't that tough, was it?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
You're a natural. You're made for this. And it is a little sad that, unfortunately, you came in the same term I was doing the film class that we made, and I certainly hope that while you weren't able to be a part of it for the first time around, I definitely would love to talk to you about, whenever that class runs again, getting you in that, because I think that will be an opportunity for you to maybe continue to polish those skills. And I'd love to see, you'll have to email me the YouTube channel so I can check out some of the films you've made.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be glad to do that.
Cool. All right, well, that's going to do it for another episode of the Nightly News Podcast. Again, please join us at the CPC Film Series with Robin Hood Men in Tights, presented by Professor Tom Davis and sponsored by the Colleges Against Cancer Club on Friday, November 5th at 6 o'clock. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. So for Nightly News reporter Dylan Bowman and Professor Tom Davis, this is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.
This is Dr. Linda Fedrizzi Williams, and you are listening to the Nightly News Podcast.
Well, welcome everybody to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am sitting in today with a very special guest, someone who I've been very much looking forward to chatting with, is the SGA President, Michelle Donaghy. Michelle, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you.
So, first of all, before we get into our discussion, obviously we're also being joined here by, I don't have to say co-president anymore, Jen.
I know, it's so sad.
You are the Nightly News President, Jen L. Dulac. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I love being on.
Well, we love to have you. And again, we've kind of talked about this. Leslie Heimbaugh will be graduating at the end of this term, and she is still hanging around, helping us out, sort of, still being a valuable asset to the club. But unfortunately, I hate saying that. It should be fortunately she's graduating, but unfortunately for the club, she is graduating. So speaking of somebody who is graduating, Michelle, you're looking forward to graduation here in the very immediate future. And so that's part of what we're going to talk about today. what has your SGA presidency been like? A little bit more about your background, some of the things that SGA is coming up this term, but also taking a look at what you feel that your legacy is as SGA president.
Yeah, so I started as SGA president like in January, and honestly, I didn't really know what I was getting into.
Few people do.
Yeah, but I was pretty new. I was the treasurer of SGA like the term prior, so what was it? The fall term of 2020, and so the first thing I wanted to do is kind of get the student involvement with like administrators more involved. So we have that like transparency aspect that we've been working really hard with President Fedrizzi during like our cabinet meetings to fulfill, which is probably the reason why we've done a lot of like engagement per se. Like, so when we were discussing some of our issues like with like McGraw-Hill and whatnot, we were like, yeah, let's get student engagement to, get feedback on some of the programs that, classes use, and just kind of going back and forth and then really trying to get students' aspect on what can be improved on campus.
I love that. I want to kind of go back to the beginning. Somebody said, and I don't remember where specifically I'd heard this, that you were 17 years old and you're about to graduate from college. And so we were just chatting. Not only did you start at Central Penn when you were 15 years old, you came to Central Penn with 30 credits, 30 college credits that you did in high school. That is, this is unlike anything I've ever heard. I've had dual enrollment students in my classes before, which means that they're still in high school, but they're able to take some college classes. How in the world did you do this?
Definitely time management is a key to all of that when you're in high school, because I didn't work just because of my age. Like when I was in the 9th grade, I was like, 14, 13-ish, because I skipped the 10th grade. And I was definitely an overachiever. And
you're graduating college at 17. I think that's fairly obvious.
Yeah, but I had a lot of spare time. Sadly, I didn't have that many friends, to be honest, because I was just so caught up with like academia. And it wasn't until I did aquaponics internship and I started exploring my school's dual enrollment options. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm interested in the business field. I'm going to take some classes just to familiarize myself with that. But honestly, it was mostly because I didn't want to take that many AP classes, because I was like, it's not worth taking a class and then have to take a test at the end of it and possibly get a 5 or a 4. It makes more sense logically to just take college classes.
Sure.
Because if you pass it, you pass, and it transfers over, as long as you make sure it transfers over.
Right, of course.
And that's how I just ended up, okay, yeah, I'm going to take some English classes, and then I'll take some math classes. And then I was like, yeah, I'll just take a full load, and it'll be great.
I think that's incredible. Here's what's even more incredible. You've done an internship who has since hired you on. Highmark. We're talking about a major company in this area at 17 years old. You have, and I don't mean to keep coming back to the age thing, I promise, but at 17 years old, you've not only almost finished college, you've completed an internship and got hired on at a major company in this area. What does that mean to you?
It's kind of surreal, especially when I'm talking with my manager at Highmark, because I'm a business systems analyst and we write requirements and test plans and just kind of work with the customer. And she's always like, oh, what are your next steps? And I feel like when everyone asks that, I don't have an answer.
Don't. It's okay.
And it's like, because I have so many different goals at mind, because I want to get experience in marketing, in finance, in like systems analysts, and like analyzing data. And it's like, I don't have a set plan, but I know what I want to do at the end of it, which is my answer for almost everything now. It's I want to do something like in entrepreneurship,
Sure.
which is why I want to get an aspect of everything. That way, when I own my own business, I'll know how to do it, and I can just oversee everyone, but still kind of give control.
I think, and I asked this as we were getting ready for our show today, are you going to go to grad school? And you said, I'm not sure. And I'm glad. That's a good answer. But because one of the things that I always talk to students about, and obviously I have students come to me asking me my opinion about grad school because I'm in grad school right now. The thing is, grad school really doesn't mean much unless you have experience that goes along with it. A lot of times people go to grad school because they don't have another option. They're not sure what their career goals are. Maybe they have a hard time finding a job. That is not the reason to go to grad school. The reason to go to grad school is to supplement the experience that you already have. So if you just go to your undergrad, do that, and you go to your grad school, and yes, you have a master's degree, but if you have no relevant experience, you're not going to get hired there either. So I really think that and trust me, anyone who would suggest that anybody who would ask me for advice, I would tell them the exact same thing. Stay out of school for a little while, not only find and get some experience, but also find an employer that might help support you in that goal that you have. So I think that's wonderful.
Michelle, I have been watching from the sidelines in your success, and I really appreciate the amount of work that you've been doing to incorporate students' opinions back into what the SGA has been doing. For a long time, the SGA and the both on and off campus students have kind of been separate groups, although they should be collaborating. And you've been one of the more recent SGA presidents that's really incorporated that into the core of what you do. What are some of the changes that you're going to be implementing now that you've gotten some of that feedback from our students?
Yeah, give me 1 second to think about that. Because we have a lot. So we actually came out with a form, last term? And one of the things that students wanted is a lot of events during the night. And that was like for commuter students, people who have night classes, people with kids. And we decided that, okay, we're going to incorporate that this term. And we're really going to try to push for that. So some of the events that we're having, they're going to be open to kids, to parents that do have children and, want to come maybe during the weekend or on Friday nights, like where food's provided and whatnot. So you're not, so it's incorporating everyone on campus instead of just like a small group, because a lot of the times you have engagement just from the people living on campus, and then you have some commuters who are involved, but not everyone. So we want to be more inclusive. And then, as previously mentioned, just adding, because even though there is transparency, sometimes some things can get lost in translation. So we've really been trying to work with the admin to come out with forms and be like, yeah, this is what we're going to be going over and really pushing for advice of what you want to change. So instead of just incorporating professors' opinions on some of the programs like McGraw-Hill or Pearson or whatnot, then you also have students be like, okay, yeah, I really like this, but at the same time I don't, and just conversing with that.
Have you found any struggles since you are a commuter on campus in trying to connect with some of the residential students?
Sort of, definitely, because when I first came on campus, I didn't use the cafe whatsoever, and I feel that's the main place where people converse, and during lunchtime you have a lot of conversations, but also because there's residential events, you're just not on campus that often. And because you're not on campus that often, because maybe you're only taking a night class or maybe 1 day class, it can be so hard to just really talk with people, because no one's out when you're here, and it's okay, I call it a ghost town in some areas during the night, but when you meet a person and you're okay, and you go to an event, let's say so back to Class Blast, some events such as those where you're getting engagement, you're seeing different clubs, you get to talk with different students and you get to meet people. That's where you kind of find engagement, and that's where I've found that if you join a club and you start participating, you're going to meet people. And that was super important for me. That's one of the main goals I came here for Central Penn. I was I do not want to be alone. I want to have friends. I want to have a group, and I want to, get involved, because otherwise I don't feel my college experience will be worth it, even though I'm a commuter.
Well, beyond that, it's not just necessarily having friends and having a social relationship. It's easier to navigate the college process if you have other people who are going along with you. And I can, like I said, I'm going for my PhD right now, and without some of my colleagues in these classes, I would feel isolated, because I'm driving 3 hours to go to school, and we have school twice a month. And if I didn't have people that I was able to associate with outside of class, I really wouldn't feel the same way that I do. So I totally understand where you're coming from. Now tell me, why did you want to get involved with SGA, being that club that you wanted to be a part of?
It actually was because my sister, she actually came here to Central Penn, and she was a part of Student Government Association, and she talked really highly about it. And I was like, okay, I want to see what's it about. And also because of like the mission statement for SGA, which is, engaging student involvement and, being the voice for the students. And that's something that really interested me, because in almost every company that I've ever been involved with, like for my first job, which was at Starbucks, it's always like been the people. Like that has been like the mission, like getting to know everyone. And I feel like that's the type of leader that I've always tried to be, especially in high school, is trying to get everyone's opinion and then get an idea, not just taking from like making it a popularity contest, but getting everyone's opinion. And because like everyone's opinion matters, especially when you're talking about policy and you're trying to, make an impact. You got to know what everyone wants and what everyone's ideas are, and like maybe what concerns they have, even if it's more on a private scale, because, not everyone is willing to talk, and that's completely fine. But, just pulling someone aside and just being like, what do you think about this? Like, do you have another idea? Because if you just have one idea and you just go with it, you're missing out on everything else that, could be important, that could substantially increase your, the way that you market or advertise.
I totally agree. I just have one more question, and then I want to turn it over to Jen for a little while too, because I think that you guys have a good rapport as well. Obviously, one of the big parts of being an SGA is listening to students, but another major part is representing those students to our college president. It's not every college that the SGA has the opportunity to have time with the president of the institution. What impact do you think that direct access has, not only for you and the SGA, but then in turn the students?
Yeah, I would say it's a huge impact. Fedrizzi, she's absolutely...
Dr. Fedrizzi.
Yes, Dr. Fedrizzi is absolutely amazing at, like, if you tell her something, she's completely on it. And it's been very few people that I've ever met in my entire, like, years of being alive.
The 17.
Yeah, 17 years of being alive, where I can just talk to someone and they're immediately on it and you don't have to wait. And that's a great connection, I think, that we have, because if you tell her something and maybe you don't know exactly where to go, she can guide you in the right direction. And the words of wisdom that she has spoken is just incredible.
She's a good person to have on your side.
Yes.
So Michelle, we talk a lot about the things that you do, here on the college campus and the ways that you advocate and give to all these other people. But I think something that could be really helpful for other people who are listening is, what are ways that you give back to yourself? How do you take care of yourself in all this time that you're giving to all these other people?
Probably the first thing is sleep. That's always very important, even though it's not necessarily time for yourself. I mean, like, getting 8 hours of sleep is important, but also recognizing your limits. Definitely, a lot of people have always told me that sometimes it's better just to say no. A no is as powerful as a yes, and sometimes that's often forgotten about, because you only have 24 hours in the day, and you have to spread it between work, school, and yourself, and relationship and networking building and whatnot. And if you don't do that, you're gonna wear yourself out. And I'm probably not the best example of it, but I still try to run and still do fun activities. But, there have been moments in, my college career where I have, burnt myself out, and maybe recognizing to take a step back is important. And just looking at the big picture instead of just seeing what's ahead of you. Think about what you're doing now, and think about how much you're doing now instead of focusing on what you're going to do tomorrow or the next day. Be like, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do in the next 5 minutes? And then how am I going to utilize that to the best of my ability?
And Jen, to what extent can you agree or associate with that message?
I mean, me and Professor Miller have had multiple conversations about the amount of time that I dedicate to other people, my work, academia. And you have to separate yourself from your work and think about, how can I, a lot of times we think that our work is what's benefiting us, but that's not the truth, because our work is what's benefiting other people. What we really need to think about is, how can we incorporate time for ourselves, even if it doesn't feel good all the time, over, kind of like that idea of consciously smiling and it makes you happier. If you consciously do things for yourself, it's going to make you feel better. And so, sometimes you just need to like take a shower. Sometimes you need to take a nap. Sometimes you eat a snack. You need to do the simple things for yourself that you kind of don't really put too much thought into. But when you put a lot of thought into them, it really adds a lot of vividness to your day, and you're not so drained and dragging all the time, you know?
Yeah.
I think you can probably feel that feeling.
Yeah.
Let me just say that whatever impact the both of you have during the remaining time here at the college, you know, I hope that you pay it forward to the people who you associate with. I hope that whatever it is that you can partake on to the future students here, or I mean current students, but future and as far as, you know, upperclassmen like the both of you, can really go a long way. And the legacy that you might have here is going to be even more robust if you can also assist some of your classmates, your fellow classmates, because both of you have the right attitude. Maybe it took you a little while to figure that out and to figure out that balance, which I think you've both talked about. But I also think that anything that you can share with your fellow student body, I mean, Jen, you as the president of multiple clubs here on campus, Michelle, you as the, you know, SGA president, you have a voice that people will listen to and respect. Doesn't always seem that way, but I can promise you these are the types of things that people are going to remember a long time about their college experience, and you have the opportunity to help with that. Before we get out of here, I want to talk real quickly about a couple of things. First of all, we have Club Wars coming up on November the 19th. So tell us a little bit about Club Wars and how SGA is involved in that.
Yeah, so SGA has worked with student ambassadors and AAB, or Activities Advisory Board, to plan out Club Wars. It's been something that we've been planning since January, so it's taken a lot of planning. And actually, I can't forget Art Club, because Art Club has played a huge role in recreating the Spirit Stick. So essentially, Club Wars is an event that used to be run by student ambassadors, and then we kind of just brought it up because of COVID and everything that has happened. It kind of got pushed aside. But it's a way for clubs to get engaged and kind of compete in a little event where there's different activities like kickball and like can jam, and then I think we have
I am the can jam master.
Oh,
yeah.
gonna have to play against Kevin from public safety.
Hey, last time I was challenged to cornhole, I ended up winning. So I mean, I'll answer the bell.
Yeah, Nightly News should be on here. You know, as a team, you know, get Paul Miller on there.
Yeah, we gotta get some coverage of that.
Yeah, that would be really fun.
So if your club is interested in joining Club Wars, of course you can always reach out to Michelle, or you can reach out to Adrian Thoman, who's also helping out organizing that.
Yep.
I just have one final question, and then I'll turn it over to Jen if she has a final question before we're done. I've had a professional interaction with every SGA president that we've ever had. Just through the club, we've actually had several former communication students who were the SGA president. One of the things that I always ask them is what they feel their legacy is here at Central Penn. So I'm going to ask you that same question. You've been president of the SGA for this entire year, and I want to know if you had to pick one or two things that you believe are going to define your legacy here at the college, what would they be?
Probably the big one would be just implementing transparency. It's something that all the officers have worked so hard on throughout the entire year of office, and it's something that we continue to work on because you can never have enough transparency, especially when you're talking about topics that influence the students and influence the staff and influence everyone on campus.
You've clearly taken it to heart how important this role and position is. Any final thoughts, Jen?
No, I mean, I don't really have a final thought or question, but I think the last thing I want to say is just thank you for really caring about the people that you're representing and just putting a lot of thought into the amount of work that you do. So just a simple thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on this podcast. It's pretty amazing.
It's our pleasure, and I wish it could have been sooner. Unfortunately, we didn't do the podcast for a little while earlier in the year. Let me put it this way. When I found out your age, and I don't mean to keep coming back to that because you've obviously gotten past that, I never would have imagined. I thought you were in your 20s just because of your professionalism, your attitude, the way that you worked with whether it was students or other faculty members or staff members. I mean, you're wise beyond your years, Michelle. So frankly, we're going to miss you. I mean, and I hope the legacy that you have developed for yourself is one that's always remembered. And I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that you always remember that you've got a family here at Central Penn, and if you ever need us, you need to let us know.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Of course. Well, I want to thank SGA President Michelle Donaghy for joining us today. Of course, I also want to thank Nightly News President Janelle Dulac for joining us as well. So, ladies, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. We'll see you again next time.